You are listening to We Saw the Devil, an investigative and conversational true crime podcast that deep dives into fascinating criminal cases that are solved, unsolved, or ongoing. From America's Lori Vallow to Germany's Armin Meiwes, we examine and discuss the world's most shocking cases. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to follow us online. Check us out at WeSawTheDevil.com and We Saw the Devil on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget, you can become part of the show by backing us on Patreon. Hello, everyone. You are listening to We Saw the Devil. This is your host, Robin, and I am here today with part 3 of the Chris Chan series that I've been doing. And I have to say that this one is quite a doozy. There have been few moments in the last couple years that I've been doing true crime podcasting that I've actually needed a moment, maybe gag a little, recollect my thoughts, and just overall realize that I have a bit of a weak constitution. That moment rarely happens. And I have to say that while researching this episode, it finally did. But we're going to get into that in a minute. Just want to give you guys a quick update for the schedule this week. Chris Chan episode came out today, Thursday. Saturday, I'm going to have a true crime news update coming out on a variety of different cases going on. Lori Vallow is back in court. Did you guys hear about that? Have you been following that? Also, the Moscow, Idaho case as well. A lot of forward movement in that. And then what's going on in the Delphi murders? Richard Allen, what's going on there? So going to give an update on Saturday. And then next week, next Thursday, Iris is going to be returning, and we are going to be talking about the Carly Russell case. Whew, y'all, I have some thoughts on that. Aside from the fact that there was no kidnapping, and the fact that she is now facing a laundry list of crimes herself, there's a lot to unpack there. Oh man, hate to see it when things like this happen. It's so sad and maddening. So that's the schedule for the remainder of the, I would say, next week and a half or so. So if you have interest in any of those topics, make sure to subscribe and stick around for those. Other than that, don't forget to check out the website. From there, you can find links to all of our social media platforms, Facebook. I will continue to call it Twitter. I will never cave to Elon in this X bullshit that he's on about right now. So Twitter, Instagram, and others. And if you have any questions, suggestions, anything like that, feedback, you can send me an email directly at info@wesawthedevil.com. So before we begin this episode, I just want to say, Chris Chan, I know, is kind of a weird pick for this channel, for this podcast. And the reason why I chose it is, y'all, I'm 38 years old, right? Getting up there. I remember when AOL came out on the discs that you had to download, and it gave you so many free hours, and you would go into a local computer store and keep getting the discs and whatnot so you could keep getting your free trial. I remember I was just a kid in middle school and, take over the phone line. Parents get pissed. You're on the internet too long. Calls can't come through. That was the time period that I grew up in when I was a kid. I discovered the Riot Grrrl scene, bands like Sleater Kinney, L7, La Tigra, bands like that. I discovered the Grateful Dead. I discovered The Cure. I discovered the goth scene. Poppy Z. Bright, the author. I discovered so much online. My internet access was largely left completely unchecked by my parents. And so I pretty much just typed in whatever I wanted to. And back in the early 90s, I don't recall any form of internet celebrity, right? Internet icon, anything like that. Sure, there were some pretty colorful personalities, but we weren't talking about influencer culture, right? It was pretty much just us in the Wild West finding random websites. People were still kind of figuring it out as they went along. And it was a fun time. I graduated high school and then went to college. And that's really when the Chris Chan saga started taking place. I was a sophomore in college. It was the Bush years. We were at war. There were a lot of crazy websites. There were all the gore websites, the satirical comedy and parody websites. There just was a lot going on in the early 2000s online. 4chan came out in 2003, and that was absolutely a cesspool from basically the start. But these were all sites that you kind of traveled to occasionally on some sort of warped internet sightseeing tour, right? It was really when the internet had gained a lot of content and we were logging on and there was entertainment and bullying, and it was pretty terrible. This is the era of Chris Chan. The Chris Chan stuff really took off starting in like 2007 or so, and he was quite literally one of the very first victims of widespread internet trolling. And due to, sadly, the severity of his autism, as well as just complete lack of social and personal awareness, he shared videos of himself, submitted emails, allowed people to have his password and hack his emails, and he is considered the most well-documented human being online. Now, you may be wondering, okay, well, that's great and all, but why are you covering it on We Saw the Devil? The reason that I'm covering it on We Saw the Devil is because it is an absolute shit show. It's honestly a perfectly written tragedy. Shakespeare could do no better. There are no heroes in the Chris Chan saga. No one involved in this saga has the moral high ground in any capacity whatsoever. Whether it's Chris, any of his friends, any of the internet trolls, Chris's family, do-gooders who are trying to intervene and help. It's all pretty awful. I think that everything about Chris Chan, because he is so well documented, I think it's a fascinating examination of just the psychology of someone so incredibly mentally ill that they are willing to document their deepest, darkest thoughts. Even your best friend. If you think about the friend you've known the longest, you don't have access to every single email they've ever sent, half of their actual phone calls, audio recordings of that, their deepest, darkest secrets, every blog article they've posted. I mean, discussion of their masturbation habits. This man is heavily documented. So for me, I think it's incredibly sad to see someone with such severe autism who was emotionally abused, completely neglected, basically abandoned and left to their own devices. Sure, Chris lived with his mother and his family, but they did not attempt in any way, shape, or form to prepare Chris for the outside world. He was completely left to his own devices, living in a cesspool fantasy world that he has created in his own head, produced artwork and comics and a website about this, and his narcissism and entitlement actually ends up becoming dangerous and a crime is committed. And it's heinous. So that's ultimately why I'm covering this case. In the last episode, I covered Chris Chan receiving a 1-year suspension from Piedmont, Virginia Community College. If you recall, it was due to him repeatedly harassing female students with that handheld date solicitation sign, as well as the fact that he stalked and harassed the dean of students, Mary Lee Walsh. He drew pornographic pictures of her and even created a Lost Souls video game character based on her likeness. Now, during the time of Chris's suspension for that, he doubled down on his comic Sonichu, put out a bunch of Sonic News Dash, came out with a couple comic issues, and he also started a YouTube page. The first upload that Chris ever made onto YouTube showed him playing Lost Souls. He played a character based on his own physical likeness, and then he beat up a character, one that he had made to look like Mary Lee Walsh. So for this episode, we're picking right up where I left off. And I think this one is especially important for the quote-unquote character development here. You're really going to begin to understand how Chris's mind works. And we're going to go into some pretty dark, disturbing, and disgusting areas here. So it's very, very, very rare that I give a disclaimer. I personally don't believe in disclaimers when it comes to true crime podcasts. But if you are easily offended or listening with a child around, this may not be the episode that you want to listen to out loud. So the suspension from Piedmont began in August of 2004. During his time off, as I covered in the previous episode, Chris continued on his sweetheart quest. He would go to the mall with his signs, and then when he was inevitably kicked out of that mall for making women uncomfortable, he resorted to a red string game where he tied a heavy note to a red string and then cast the line out at women who passed him. He was quite literally trying to, quote, reel them in, end quote. He also spent a considerable amount of time at this point on his new obsession, which was Yu-Gi-Oh! He would draw custom cards and create characters. He was also spending a considerable amount of time at a local shop called The Game Place, which is, you guessed it, dedicated to gaming, primarily cards, tabletop, anime, things like that. Another big moment was Christmas of 2004. Chris recorded his family's Christmas where he gave his father Bob a DVD of Fraggle Rock, but he very much acted like he wanted it for himself, so Bob chose a separate gift. He then again confirmed that all he wanted was a boyfriend-free girl and said that Santa didn't bring him one. At this point in 2004, Chris still believed in Santa Claus as a college student. It was during this time that he began to visit the mall again. He was still pissed and upset from having his last love quest with the red string, quote, foiled. But nevertheless, they allowed him back in after a temporary ban. This time, though, he didn't bring his signs with him. Instead, he took to pacing in front of PacSun and Abercrombie and Fitch, and he would just pace back and forth for hours. He would occasionally talk to women who passed, but largely left them alone and just paced. Chris also signed up for a lot of online forums and message boards like Adult Swim, where he discussed various shows like Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Robot Chicken, and also My Little Pony. Chris Chan was actually basically one of the OG bronies before that subculture even really formed or started. Chris Chan was super into My Little Pony, so he's considered an OG brony and was actually present at the first My Little Pony, brony convention. And internet historians know so much about Chris Chan and so much about his life because he used the same screen names for pretty much everything. CWC or Chris Chan, Christian Chandler. And he was always talking about Sonichu, his creation, so it wasn't very difficult to find him online. So basically anything Chris has ever posted online, every single comment on a site, anything, someone has found it, screenshot it, and published it and cataloged it. Also during this time, he sent a personal ad into Nintendo Power magazine and then also began to sign the guest book on his own personal website that he created, pretending to be various hot girls complimenting himself. However, his pacing at the mall apparently paid off in some way, because on February 5th of 2005, a blog article titled The Tale of the Crazy Pacer showed up on a LiveJournal. In it, a PacSun employee by the name of Anna McLaren documents a random encounter with a, quote, odd and creepy man who paces outside of her store. She talks about basically encountering Chris Chan. She says, "Okay, I've put this one off long enough. It's time for the story of all stories. The tale of the crazy pacer. Once upon a time, there was a guy who paced in front of Abercrombie and Fitch. He'd come and do it for hours on end, just walking back and forth. He was an okay-looking guy, not evil-looking like creepy molester dude. So he would pace for his allotted time, then leave. Sometimes as he paced, he would sing or shout. Nobody really could ever tell what he was saying. Oh yeah, and he always wore the same shirt, a nice little long-sleeved red and blue number that had a gold crest on the left side and a white collar with cuffs. Eventually, I guess, he got bored of just pacing like that because he started to bring his Game Boy SP with him. He had his headphones hooked up to it, so he would pace like that all the time. His peak hours were usually between 2 and 4 p.m., and he usually left by 5. Then, one day, he decided to start pacing on the PacSun side. So he started pacing in front of our store. I think the people at Abercrombie were relieved because they were worried about the floor out front getting worn down. So this one day, on the day it started, it will be explained in short order, we were doing floor set, and Lin noticed that crazy pacer guy kept looking into PacSun as he paced, and she also noticed that he has a fair amount of junk in his trunk, if you know what I mean. And Star and I both noticed at the same time that his jeans were high water, and we all laughed at him. No, actually, we were laughing with him. He just didn't know it, and he wasn't laughing along. And this day, he was acting particularly crazy. He'd pace and pace, then stop and shout something at the wall, then keep pacing. And he also did some singing. It was hilarious. So anyways, someone, I can't remember who, suggested that the next time he looked in, we wave at him. Whoever suggested it should die, unless it was me, in which case I feel I've received enough punishment. Of course he looked in, and we all waved at him. He looked kind of bewildered and sort of scared at first, but quickly caught on and waved back. Then he went back to his pacing. But he was looking into PacSun with greater frequency now, and anytime anyone would make eye contact with him, he'd wave. I had to go get Star an iced tea from Sabaro's, so I left and waved at Pacer as I went out. When I came back, he was sitting cross-legged on the floor outside PacSun, and he took the initiative and waved at me first. I smiled and waved back, but the smile wasn't to be friendly. It was because I thought it was hilarious that he was now sitting on the floor like that. Good thing he couldn't tell the difference. So we went on about our business doing floor set and junks, and a little while later he came in. I was behind the counter and Star was all, "Psst, Anna, he's coming in." I was kind of apprehensive about this. I mean, I had been doing floor set all day and I didn't really feel up to dealing with another crazy. But he came right up to the counter that I was standing behind and he looks right at me all fidgety and twitchy and goes, "You look to be about 19 years old, right?" I busted out laughing because he guessed it. Star was laughing too, over from the sidelines where it was safe. "That's exactly right," I affirmed. She then goes on to tell the story about how Chris Chan awkwardly flirted with her. His opening line was apparently, "My name is Christian, but you can call me Chris. I'm Christian W. Chandler. Do angels have names?" Apparently, he had meant to say, "Do angels like you have names?" But he was so nervous he couldn't even get that out right. She basically kindly turned him down, and he asked her for her name, and she said, "Anna." He said, "Oh, that's a very pretty name, and I like your hair. It's a very pretty color. My eyes are two different colors. One of them is green, the other is blue. That's because I had pink eye a while back and one of them stayed that way." Yeah. He asked for a number, she rejected him and said no, and then he asked her if she had the internet. Anna said yes. So he went back to his bags. He came out with a Sonichu business card, one that he had printed off himself on regular printer paper and handed it to her. And at that point, Anna had no intention of emailing Chris at any point, much less ever speaking to him again. But he did return 3 days later with a note, which she also documented in the blog. Basically, you guessed it, the love quest. That being said, Chris more or less became the joke of the whole mall, especially the women and girls who worked there. A lot of the girls in the mall actually banded together because of Chris Chan and because he was hitting on all of them and making them all uncomfortable. One day, a girl named Hannah, who worked at the Starbucks at the mall, decided that she was going to troll Chris. And she walked up to him and she asked him out on a date. He was excited, and the two of them went to the McDonald's in the food court to talk on their little date. As soon as Hannah said she had to go back to work, Anna from PacSun came over and told Chris that Hannah was actually a troll, setting him up for a very public prank. After confronting Hannah about it, Chris learned the truth. And apparently, he screamed no so loudly and violently that it got him banned again indefinitely from the Fashion Square Mall. And that was a very nice thing for Anna to do. Even though Chris was creepy and odd and hitting on her, she recognized that he had some developmental disabilities and she actually kind of felt bad for him. So she did actually warn him of that prank. Now, more on Anna later, but it's just worth noting that this is the time frame that he met Anna and how he met her. As I said also a moment ago, Chris was very active on various internet forums and message boards, and he would inappropriately discuss his own life in the midst of people discussing just generic TV shows. So after the incident with Hannah, he wrote, quote, "My heart has been broken down to 15% before. I was trying to get an 18 to my age-year-old sweetheart at my college when Mary Lee Walsh ripped up the signs I used that said I'm a single guy looking for an 18 to my year-old boyfriend-free girl. My heart was shattered down to 15% until I met a girl and it went back up to 100%. But it was a joke being pulled on me, so at the end of our mini date at the McDonald's, she said it was just a joke. That brought my heart down to 10%. A couple months later, in July, Chris was arrested for the very first time. He was loitering with his Love Quest signs at his local Target, and the security guard requested that he leave. Chris actually refused. And he wrote about this incident in his blog. He said, July 20th, 2005. I was at the new Target store, just hanging around, not bothering anyone. And from out of the blue, these two mana-jerks asked me to leave because they said that I was loitering. I was not. I was there hoping to find an 18 to 23-year-old boyfriend-free girl like I usually do. Then, from out of the blue, after I told them off, they came back with two jerk-offs. I was slightly intimidated, but mostly annoyed and ready to strike back on them. They asked me to leave and never return. I did not want to leave. I would have left peacefully, in fact. I was ready to go. but I had prepared a speech to say to them stupid jerk-offs. And during the middle of my speech, they chased me, pulled my pants, and pinned me to the floor. 5 jerk-offs dogpiled on me as I struggled to get free. 1,000 pounds of sausages on my 180-pound body was seriously a cutoff for my breathing flow. They handcuffed my wrists and legs, they hogtied me. Not only did I feel humiliated from being the victim, but I was angry at them, not only for handcuffing me, but for once again thwarting my efforts in trying to find a boyfriend-free girl. He then talked about how they took him directly to jail, and then he was released to his family just a couple hours later, but he laments the fact that he had to go to court in order to solve this. So on August 1st, 2005, Chris returned to Piedmont, Virginia Community College. He had been suspended, but he had satisfactorily completed his therapy requirement. His friend at that point, Anna, also announced that she was moving to Utah. Chris was devastated by this, but he had also begun talking to girls online on MySpace. One girl named Jelena and another girl named Lindsay. Now, it's unknown as to whether they were actual trolls as well, but he never met either of them in person, so it really doesn't matter. 2 weeks later, on August 24th, while hanging out at that local gaming shop, the gaming place, Chris, who at this point is 23 years old, met 17-year-old Megan Schroeder while playing in a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. And they actually became fast friends. Megan apparently has a brother. It's been stated by many people that her brother is special needs, but it has also been debunked by others who are close to her. But what is known is that she was definitely the black sheep of her family and friends, and she was into anime, Sailor Moon, My Little Pony, and in that small town, apparently that was just not very common, so she was more or less an outcast. And Chris was absolutely thrilled with his new quote-unquote gal pal. They would see each other weekly at the gaming place. Now, in October, a couple months later, a user in the Sega game console website Aurum talked about the Sonichu comic and also Chris Chan himself. That is the first, earliest known documented discussion from outsiders regarding Chris Chan. That was October of 2005. Chris Chan isn't aware of the fact that people are starting to talk about him online. Most of his time was being spent at the Piedmont, Virginia Community College, as well as the gaming place. Now, he was also still wholly dedicated to his love quest, but he had begun at this point also to push his limits with his new friend Megan. We know this because Chris Chan's email account has been hacked countless times, and all of his emails have been made public. And I'm going to say something that's kind of unpopular here. You see, in the Chris Chan multiverse, Megan is kind of a controversial figure. She would eventually go on to ask Chris to bid on anime or My Little Pony items for her on eBay. She later claimed, and her friends and family confirmed, that she did pay Chris back or traded her collectibles as payment. But a lot of people who follow the Chris Chan saga see her as someone who is just enabling and then also using Chris because he liked her. And I don't personally feel that she was. Also, her emails are very healthily written. They come from a very mentally healthy sounding place. And she attempts to establish very firm boundaries with him while also being polite. She actually appears to have kind of the emotional intelligence of someone much, 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 much older and mature than her. Megan tells Chris that she does not want a relationship and does not feel romantically towards him. You know, Megan is very forthright, and she tells Chris that she does not want a relationship with him, that she has no romantic feelings for him. She also refuses to give him her direct phone number and says that she prefers to speak in person at the gaming place when they see each other while they play officially or through email. She tells him that she's not like the other girls. She is not boy crazy, that she does not want him in that way. She does say that she wants to remain friends with him. And Chris will reply via email, and he appears to respect those boundaries. He says that he understands. You know, he says that hopefully one day that she'll change her mind, but he understands and respects it. And it was very clear overall that he did consider her a friend because she was teaching him about her interests, like My Little Pony and Sailor Moon. A couple months later, we can start to see Chris becoming more frustrated with the fact that he does not have a girlfriend. He wrote to the editor of a magazine called Shoujo Beat, which is an anime magazine geared towards young girls. And in it, he wrote, "Oh boy, Riko Izawa, an absolute boyfriend," which is an anime series, "sort of has the same problem I do. She can't get a guy and I can't get a girl. Here's my sitch. All the pretty girls are already paired up with some jerk, thus leaving me with none to choose from. Also, nobody can tell off the bat a paired up girl from a boyfriend free girl. At first, it's equally hard for Riko to find a girlfriend free boy, but then she is granted this wish where she gets a girlfriend free boy. Although he's a robot, delivered to her doorstep. Lucky girl. I'm 23 years old. One would think I'd have gotten a girlfriend by now, but no, I haven't. I'm stuck in the situation where if my parents should pass away, I will be a very lonely virgin." This is really the first time that we see Chris not just kind of talking from a wholesome, cute place of, I want a girlfriend, I want to, kind of hold the hands and do stuff with a girlfriend. It's, I will be a lonely virgin. He actually adds sex to the mix here. Chris's life pretty much sustains this for a while until May of 2006. It's a little creepy at this point. Megan asks Chris to bid on authentic pictures of German soldiers during World War II. Megan actually admits that she's attracted to soldiers. And Chris bid on multiple lots and actually won some of them, giving them to Megan. He also won auctions for a bootylicious love doll and various anime-themed collectibles. But another chapter was coming to a close in Chris's life. On May 12th, after 5 years, Christian graduated from PVCC with his CAD associate's degree. At his graduation, he wore his high school robe, completely different set of colors, he was the only one, as well as his Sonichu medallion. And now that Chris had finally graduated, you'd think that he would get a job using his CAD degree, or a job in general. But no, he doubled down on the Sonichu comics, and here his real life was clearly being reflected in the comics. His childhood friend Sarah got married, one of his quote-unquote gal pals from high school. So Chris made a Sonichu issue all about how he attended her wedding in spirit. It closes with Sarah thanking Chris for all of the good memories they had and built and shared, and also wishes him luck in his efforts of winning Megan's love. And that's not the only mention of Megan at this time. The Sonichu series itself gained 2 new characters, one being a character that Megan herself drew, and then another of Megan herself that Chris drew, like how he envisioned her. In the comic, Chris's character says, quote, "I hope that I will get to walk down that aisle someday myself, with no trouble. Asymmetrical feelings. I love Megan, yet she's not ready to return or seek it. I'd feel better if I could chat with her on the phone, although she's uncomfortable doing that. Our email communications are okay, but speech speaks louder than typed words." And on a side note, can you fucking imagine realizing that this was being broadcast all over the internet and 4chan? Megan had absolutely no idea. And it was becoming clear that Chris's affection towards Megan was heading somewhere obsessive. The next issue included a whole story about how he, Megan, and Chris's young female fantasy daughter, Crystal, fought off Mary Lee Walsh's attempted invasion of his fantastical world, Quickville. The final panel is a classic action movie trope of Megan crying that she almost lost Chris for good, with him comforting her. So just to recap that word salad there, when Chris was kicked out of his community college, the dean of students was Mary Lee Walsh. So Chris had been obsessively drawing Mary Lee Walsh as the villain in all of his little comics. He created a Soul Calibur character for her just so he could video game beat her up. Then he started putting the 70-year-old woman, again, like 70-year-old woman, into all of these bizarre sexual villain type storylines in his shittily drawn comics. Then he met this girl Megan at the gaming place, a local gaming shop, got super strong feelings for her, and then wrote her into his comics as well. And then he and Megan together in the comic fought off Mary Lee Walsh, the dean of students in the real world, her attempted takeover of Chris's fantastical city, Fantasyland. I know. Also, around this time, there was a leaked email from Megan to Chris, and she had clearly had enough of his bullshit at this point. She said, "Yeah, although I'm not angry at you, I'm a little disappointed at your behavior. I'm really sorry this may sound harsh, but it's 100% the truth about how I feel, okay? I know I hate guys and I hate love because I told you a million times. So why do you keep getting too close and touching me? I really, in all caps, don't like it at all. I know you said because you have feelings for me and it's hard for you. But I'm sorry this sounds mean. You really need to try and get over it. If you keep hanging on like this to someone who doesn't love you back, well, it'll only make you more miserable. You need to just accept the fact that I don't and will probably never love you, so you should just take a rejuvenating breath and move on." And this is the first time that we see Chris actually physically overstepping someone's boundaries. Megan has repeatedly, apparently, at least alluded to it, that she has repeatedly asked him to not touch her, get too close to her. She has no interest in him yet again, and he is still pushing the envelope and pushing her boundaries, crossing them, in fact. So this is really good insight into Chris's lack of respect for a woman putting up boundaries against him. He appears to have absolutely no concept of consent whatsoever. Also around this time, Chris is developing a DVD that he's called Yep, I'm on TV. Because his narcissism knows no bounds and he thinks that he's a celebrity in his own world, he is making a DVD for himself. And for it, he records himself speaking about everything he's learned in his 25 now years on this planet. In September of 2006, he wrote a blog article where he talks about what he's not looking for his love quest. He says, "Current mood, thoughtful. Note, while I truly appreciate the attention from the women who live out of state and those who show off in front of an eye toy, I'm sorry, but if we could not personally meet within 20 miles of 22968, it's a big no-go. It has come to my attentive mind that a few women who may be attracted to me are those of whom I would not feel comfortable around. So to avoid later confusion, here's a list of characteristics I would really not feel comfortable around." He goes on to list smokers, real drunk alcoholics, current or previous mothers. I support them fully, but I would not feel comfortable walking into a previously made family. I would feel more comfortable starting fresh and having my own child or children. Real ugly women. Women currently over 230 pounds. Low functionality, mentally handicapped, the seriously physically deformed, autistic, high functioning or otherwise. He goes on to say, although I myself am high functioning autistic, but that's beside the point. Also, medium or dark chocolate women. If you have read any of his other Love Quest signs, he makes it very clear that African American women are out of the running. And also police women. I apologize if I have touched any nerves that may cause sadness. I'm just being honest. But don't fret, if you fit under any of these conditions, you can still help me by spreading a good word about me among the 18 to 24-year-old boyfriend-free set. Thank you for your consideration. Have a nice day. Y'all, I am sure this is the email that broke 1,000 hearts. I'm sure all of the women found his MySpace blog, this little explainer here, and they were like, fuck. A dark chocolate woman, according to him. I'm sure the chocolate crowd is very upset as well. Just, God. A couple months after that, Adult Swim ran another contest for a PS3. Chris decided to enter. And much like the last one, it required voting. So Chris reached out to everyone that he knew, including his half-brother Cole. Now, you might remember me mentioning Cole in the very first episode. He's Barbara's son, Chris's mom. He's Barbara's son from a previous relationship. He's 19 years older than Chris, and he left home early to move to California and escape what he called an incredibly abusive childhood. Chris emailed Cole and asked him to vote for him in the contest. And Cole agreed under one set of circumstances, that Chris would ask Barbara who his real father was. Because according to Cole, Barbara is insane. The man that Barbara had married was not his actual biological father, and another man who used to come and basically identify himself as a family of the friend. He would come visit Cole when he was a kid. Cole believed that that was his father. Chris replied that he would ask her, and then he responded again and said that Barbara maintained who Cole's father was and that she said that she never regretted giving birth to him. And I find Cole's next email to be particularly profound and telling. You know, we have Chris here, a moderately functioning autistic man who likely needs personal assistance or a group home. He's being raised by two clearly depressed and neurotic individuals who have not given him proper care as their child, much less a human being. Each one of the parents has children from previous relationships, and none of those children are in touch with them, even by just like the mid 2000s. And we just don't have a lot of information or descriptions of Barbara or Bob's characters at this point. Bob really ever, but especially Barbara. But then Cole drops his reply to Chris on this. Cole said, "It's very Christian of Barbara to not regret having given birth to me, but I'm an atheist. I also have no regrets about emerging from her womb, although she's mistaken about the bunch of good years we supposedly had together. I grew up in an abusive household with Barbara and my former stepfather, Jerry, where physical and mental punishments ran the gambit from bare-assed beatings to cold showers to bizarre scenarios acted out with glee by two deeply neurotic adults. The treatment I received in Richmond, Virginia was another matter altogether. To raise a child in such conditions is inexcusable. Even at a very young age, I knew that they would abandon me. They were both irresponsible and incompetent parents who exposed me to traumas that I would rather not remember." This is very much the first bit of insight that we get into Chris's home life. It's very telling that Cole wants absolutely nothing to do with Barbara or Bob, and pretty much tells Chris that he doesn't want to hear from him again unless he's reporting that Bob has died so that he can celebrate. This is the first bit of insight that we get into Cole's relationship with Barbara, Chris's mom. And was it true, and did the same thing happen to Chris? Does that explain a lot? Don't know, but it is insight into the background stuff. The conversation between Cole and Chris is just completely oblivious to his brother's pain. Cole actually went on to become a film critic, and he was published in many different websites and made a tiny little name for himself. And he is clearly hurting. He's very articulate, very intelligent, and he is in so much pain, but Chris is absolutely oblivious to it. He just wants Cole to vote for him. And he repeatedly, after Cole pours his heart out through multiple emails, Chris just repeatedly asks him about voting for him on the Adult Swim thing. And also trying to get his address to send him that "Yep, I'm on TV" DVD. So communication between them actually dropped off shortly after this interaction. But what didn't drop off was his affection towards Megan, as well as his habit for buying items from eBay. But we also learn, universe bless you internet historians, that he wasn't just buying anime collectibles, y'all, or German soldier pics for Megan. He also purchased an Officer Nasty love doll. By the way, that was his third inflatable sex doll. A dildo, a bunch of porn, stuff like a mystery feature, Red Light Girls, Extreme Behavior 2, and Signature Series 10, Shayla Laveau. Also, more emails from Megan to Chris leaked. In one, she said, "So let me begin by saying this. However, I mean no harm towards your feelings. It's flattering how you said that your heart would remain strong to me, but I really wish it didn't. And here's why. I've told you many times I don't want a relationship with you or any other guy for that matter. And you really need to give up on me because it'll only make you miserable. You see, instead of spending all your energy looking for a girlfriend, you should lay back, take it easy, and open up. Then I think someone will show. You should try to not act so desperate. So please do not waste more thoughts on me. Of course we are friends, but friends only. Please detach yourself from me and see if anything happens between you and this other girl and her friends. My wish is for you to find someone for yourself. Me, I'm just a heartbreaker." Another one read, "When it comes to relationships, I'm a dangerous person. It seems I only break hearts. So for your own sake, please try to get rid of the lovey feelings for me and we can just be friends. So please don't touch me anymore, okay? I don't like it. And last Wednesday, you really had me pinned against the wall. Please give me more space. It's actually pretty heartbreaking that Megan put up so many boundaries and Chris continued to cross and break all of them. And a lot of people believe that Megan was using Chris for his credit card access to eBay. At that point, he was actually he gave her his credit card number and she was able to buy whatever she basically wanted, and then she would pay it back to him in payments. And again, I honestly don't believe that she was using him. She was also kind of odd in her own right. Definite social outcast and into a lot of the fringe interests that Chris was into. So their friendship isn't that odd to me. But here we are finally in October of 2007. You see, at this point, 4chan had Chris Chan on its radar. There were handfuls of posts making fun of Chris and his artwork especially. Ridiculous and trolly fan art was being made because, let's face it, if you Google Chris Chan Sonichu, it is literally like a 6-year-old drew it. 4chan was getting super popular, and locals in Virginia who knew of Chris were finding the 4chan threads and sharing firsthand accounts. Someone even took a picture of Chris at the local gameplay store and uploaded it there. So they were able to someone actually took a picture of him without his consent and uploaded it to 4chan. 4chan trolls were creating fake female accounts and contacting Chris on his website and then also on his MySpace, then screenshotting their interactions with him and posting them on 4chan. Remember the girl Anna from the mall and her LiveJournal blog post, The Tale of the Crazy Pacer? It was also uploaded there. And finally, because Chris had gained a small degree of internet notoriety on 4chan, someone created an Encyclopedia Dramatica page dedicated to him. So what was Encyclopedia Dramatica? Basically, it was a Wikipedia-looking site dedicated to memes and internet culture. It documented random people and pop culture moments from the internet. I mean, it was basically run by trolls for trolls. Chris Chan's page was officially added in early October after Encyclopedia Dramatica's founder saw him being made fun of on the site Something Awful. And Chris's entry had a lot of traffic. On November 4th, Chris uploads a quote-unquote future message video to YouTube. And that immediately goes semi-viral and gets a link to 4chan and Encyclopedia Dramatica both. And with Encyclopedia Dramatica, I'm going to start calling it ED. Now, this video, Future Message, is freely available on YouTube. Just search Chris Chan Future Message. It's about 9 minutes long. And it's Chris's message for the future generation of kids. In it, he talks about his love quest, how he thinks everyone should be straight and date the opposite sex, how little boys should have My Little Ponies because they remind them of girls, and how girls should cuddle and stroke Transformers. It is some of the most bizarre shit. He also talks about how no one should question their gender. I mean, it's wild. Also on November 4th, a 4chan user by the name of Evan decides to email Chris some of the most offensive fan art that others had created. Things like Sonichu having anal sex with Chris in various sexual positions, having sex with Sonichu. It was pretty gross stuff. Then Evan waited for a reply. And the reply that he got is exactly what ignited the entire powder keg and why Chris Chan has been basically an internet fascination since. Evan's original message to Chris said, "This is some fan art of Sonichu my friends and I have drawn. I hope you enjoy it." He then sent Chris the pictures. Chris wrote back, "Thank you for your fan art contributions. In constructive criticism, I like the one with me and the girlfriend auditions, as well as my glaring in the eyes of the blue guy. But I am feeling great detest towards the other two. Sonichu and I are not of that nature at all. If you would like to make it up to me, though, please draw a strip of Rosechu stripping for Sonichu and have him fucking her, and draw Rosechu masturbating and squirtin'. In caps. I am straight, damn it. I will not be veered in any other disgustingly grotesque direction. Again, most nasty fan arts are not appreciated at all. Please feel free to share that quote with the rest of the fans. Sincerely, Christian Weston Chandler." Masturbatin' and squirtin'. Literally the very next day, on November 5th, A somehow decent person sees all of these interactions being posted online on 4chan, emails Chris, and also lets him know that there's an Encyclopedia Dramatica page about him. Chris goes to it and is horrified by what he sees. A lot of the art depicts Chris as gay, and Sonichu and Rosechu as either gay or transgender themselves, and being a horrible homophobe, which he learned from his father Bob. Chris is outraged. So on November 11th, Chris draws 5 different erotica illustrations and uploads them to ED. They are incredibly graphic, showing various hardcore sexual positions. Scenarios, with one in particular being the biggest event in the entirety of the Chris Chan saga. One drawing showed Chris in his human form, as well as a girl. The girl is naked on her back, lying on a bed, and it depicts Chris manually stimulating her vaginal area and alludes to the girl having an orgasm, while he's using his other hand to give a thumbs up. The caption, "Your sister has come for me." I'm going to let you have a second to let that one just sink in. Now, Chris had been harassing his poor friend Megan, repeatedly trying to kiss her and touch her. She repeatedly puts up hard stop boundaries, says she isn't interested in him, that he needs to respect her wishes, and then he voluntarily uploads a picture he drew of himself fingering her to climax. And at this point, most trolls on the internet didn't even know who Megan was. She had somehow escaped internet notoriety and maintained a degree of anonymity. Even though somehow, because Chris had publicly mentioned her quite literally everywhere. ED readers originally believed that Chris was referring to his fantasy daughter Crystal in the drawing, and that Chris had been drawing something incestuous. He was revolted by these claims to the point that he went and edited the caption and left a comment, and in that, he identified Megan by name. And it did not take Megan long to be sent that page. Chris was super pissed about the ED article and had talked about it nonstop in the gaming place, so a lot of the locals were aware of this page. In early March of 2008, 3.5 months later after this drawing was uploaded, Chris realized that Megan was going to get wind of that drawing. He begins to email her bizarre apology emails, swears up and down that he's going to work to get the site taken down, and he apologizes to her profusely over and over and over again. Megan at this point had no idea of what was going on, and then she finally received the drawing. On March 13th, 2008, Megan wrote her first email to Chris regarding the drawing. She says, quote, "I just don't know what to say now. I am very much scarred by that image and it will never leave me. And I can't decide what's worse, the image in general or the fact that you intentionally drew it and gave it to the webmaster for the site that you hate so much. Not only have you poured gas on the fire by doing that, adding obscenity to the already horrific site, but you have also embarrassed and humiliated me and degraded and demeaned me whether you realize it or not. I mean, I'm not that kind of girl and you know that, so why? And you also lied to me about it. Between that and my recent heartbreak, how am I to trust another man again? Simply put, I can no longer trust anyone now. You have very much hurt me on an emotional level, and when I get hurt emotionally, it'll take a physical toll, as in no appetite, feeling sick and tired, no sleep. So I'm unsure of what to do about this. I can't say I really think of you the same anymore. I'm sorry to say. I will continue to give the remaining items for the Zune, and that will be all the contact you have with me unless I decide otherwise. I hope you understand. So we'll let time decide how I feel about this current situation. Until then, please don't come up to me anymore unless it's to give you what I owe you, which seems kind of awkward now. I know how it feels to be alone, but I can't keep throwing away my pride little by little just to keep you satisfied. You know what I mean? There has to be an enough is enough at some point, and I cannot continue to disgrace myself by forgiving those things that I never found forgivable in the first place. That's all I can think to say right now. I'm sorry, we'll just see." She then immediately follows that up the next day with, "Look, I'm unsure how I feel and what to do, so here's what I think. I'd like for you to just completely leave me alone for a while until I can sort things out for myself. You understand? It's not like I hate you, but I don't see you in the same light anymore. So just leave me be for a while. Let me try to recuperate with my other friends, and maybe we can just start from scratch sometime later. Maybe. I don't know. Just depends on how I feel, okay? So please just let me be and let me see how it goes. After emailing Megan repeatedly, after lying about the drawing a million times, Chris eventually admitted to Megan that it was in fact a drawing of her. And he gave her a million insane excuses for it. At one point, he seemed to think that Megan was only offended because she didn't understand what was going on in the drawing. He then emailed her and tried to explain what a hand job is. And then in one of the most frightening responses that Chris has ever given anyone, he said, quote, on March 18th, mind you, 4 days after this last email where she was like, please leave me the fuck alone. He said, quote, if I didn't have the foresight to put my pent up frustrations and feelings in the form of something, I might have become an abusive maniac. Chris Chan actually had the gall to say that, well, had I not drawn me finger banging you, I might have raped you instead. Yes, he said that. And even though he did apologize to her 1,000 times over, he blamed her for quite a bit of it. And it turns out that his apologies were hollow and fake because even though he realized how hurt Megan was by the fact that he published those pictures and that he was working to get them down, he actually voluntarily did it himself and uploaded the drawings of him having sex with Megan to his own personal website. He said that he, quote, I need sexy images for a new sexy site. Absolutely revolting stuff. And I find it so fascinating that someone like Chris Chan, of all people, has been so heavily followed. I mean, thousands and thousands of hours of video, his entire social media history, including every single interaction he's ever had on MySpace, Facebook, website updates and iterations, audio of private home phone calls. And that's in addition to the more public engaging things like actual interviews. Every email he's sent or received, every item he's purchased on eBay and Amazon, interactions between him and the locals there. It's just absolutely wild how well documented almost every interaction Chris has had, both in and outside of his home. Like how well documented that is online. But this is a great place to stop for this episode, guys, because this Megan situation, the discovery of the Encyclopedia Dramatica page, this is where Chris just everything goes south. Everything just starts going south. So we are going to talk about this and more on the next episode. Again, you've been listening to We Saw the Devil. I'm your host, Robin. Don't forget to check out the website at wesawthedevil.com. Hit the subscribe button if you've enjoyed this episode. And follow the show on social media so you'll stay up to date with the latest happenings. I do true crime trivia on this day, self-defense techniques, and my favorite true crime and horror memes. But that's it for today, guys. Until next crime.